Okay, and we are live now. So you're going to see that the room is going to start to fill up with participants. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're so excited to be talking to you. Wow, look at that. All right, and we want to know, where is everyone joining from today? I'm in the Bay Area, so I'm excited to see where you guys are from. We're already up to 50 people, looks like, so we're gonna just give it another minute or so.
We have our friend Jason Sidau from Next 47 Siemens.
Jason. I try. We'll Milwaukee holding it down. Great, awesome.
Ramya, who's the head of VP of product at Foghorn.
Awesome. Great. Give it another minute. We're at 71. Thank you everyone for being here today. We're so excited to talk to you about today's discussion on manufacturing and how that's going to change through digital transformation post-COVID. So we are really excited to have an amazing lineup today. We're going to give it one more minute before we start going. We've already got 80 people in the room, which is awesome. Ooh, Texas. Okay. Hey, Dwayne from Texas. Cool. Where else is everyone from? Drop it in the chat. We're excited to see where you're joining us from. Okay. Great. All right. Pleasanton. Yeah. Connecticut, Tennessee. Cool. All right. Portland, Connecticut, Minneapolis, Nashville. Awesome. All right.
Great.
Okay, great. So we're going to get started here. I'm going to briefly go over the ground rules for today, as well as explain what the Hive Think Tank does before I pass it over to TM Ravi, the Hive's founder and managing director. So let me just pull my slides up for you guys. All right, give me 1 minute. Whoop. All right, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Awesome, great, cool. Thank you everyone for joining today. Welcome to the Hive Data Think Tank webinar series. Today we're going to be discussing digital transformation of manufacturing in a post-pandemic world. My name is Maddie Watt. I'm the Senior Manager of People and Programs at the Hive. As I said, I'm going to briefly go over the ground rules for today's interaction, and then I'm going to explain what the Hive Think Tank is doing, and then pass the virtual microphone over to TM Ravi. So, chat rules. Please be respectful in the chat. Please refrain from product plugs and startup plugs. This is not the time or place for that. We love questions. We really want to hear your guys' questions. It makes it so much more engaging, so much more fun. So please use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of the screen. You're going to see a button that says Q&A, and when you click that, you can put your question in there. So instead of putting your questions in the chat, please click the Q&A button. Also, you can upvote questions. So if you see a question that's already been asked and you really want to see that one answered, go ahead and upvote it. And that way the speakers will know, wow, we have a lot of interest in that. So I'm going to answer that one first. Just so you guys know, this session is being recorded and it will be available to view later on our YouTube page, which I will drop the link for in the chat. And we really would love if you followed along and contributed on social media. So to do that, just use the hashtag HiveData. You can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. All right, with that being said, I'm going to briefly talk about what we're doing at the Hive Think Tank. Okay, we are an ecosystem of, whoop.
The slide
Yep, I got it. There we go. Resume share. Is it going? Are you guys seeing my PowerPoint?
Only the first page.
Okay,
Let me get my share going.
Thank you.
You want to stop sharing, Maddie?
Sure, thanks.
I hope it works for me.
Sometimes you guys, when we're sharing the slides, the different apps are competing and they don't want to move. All right.
Can you see my slide?
I can see it. It's not showing. It's just showing before you have it in view. I think it's paused. Well, let me go ahead and tell you what the Hive Think Tank does. Okay, so
We got it.
oh, there we go. I can see it. So the Hive Think Tank is an ecosystem of startups, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and different corporations. We are bringing you events right now virtually every single week, which is so great. And we're covering a broad range of topics, including AI, including entrepreneurship, including digital transformation. We've talked a lot about how to return to work. We're also going over things like industrials, fintech, insurtech. So we have over 11,000 community members on Meetup. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Hive Think Tank. And we are excited to continue to bring you these events. So if you want to find out more, join the Hive Think Tank on Meetup and you'll get to be updated on all of our events. Next slide, please, Ravi. Ravi?
Yeah.
It's going to be a thank you. Perfect. Thank you to our sponsors. We really appreciate our sponsors so much. Avanta Ventures, TIBCO, SAP, IBM, Verizon, and Intuit. If you want to find out more about being a sponsor, or if you want to do a webinar with us, please go ahead and contact me at maddie@hivedata.com. And then just to show you what we're doing next week, we are going to be having a really awesome in-depth conversation with Steve Omohundro, who is just a brilliant genius basically in all things AI. He's done so much and he's going to talk to us about platform AI, personal AI, and global AI. And then next slide. And then the following week on Thursday the 25th, we are going to have a webinar on API success, which is the most recent book of Nelson Petrick. And we are also going to be featuring our very own TM Ravi in that webinar. So I really hope you guys sign up and join us. I'm going to be dropping the registration links to both of these events in the chat. So without further ado, Ravi, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all for joining us today. And we're especially grateful to all the database who join us every week and for our events. So a few minutes about the Hive. So the Hive is a venture studio. Venture studio is a particular kind of venture capital entity where in addition to investing, we are also very operationally involved in working with entrepreneurs to help them start their company. And so our focus is on leveraging data and data-related techniques, AI, to drive digital transformation. And so you'll see that our focus is in a few key areas. And in particular, I wanted to highlight sort of the Industry 4.0 area. That's a lot of different segments. And so we have been working across a number of different companies focused on digital transformation of the industrial sector. And when I say industrial sector, we mean everything from sort of manufacturing, oil and gas, energy, mobility and transportation, and so on. And so we have done a number of companies, and I'd like to especially kind of highlight our relationship with both Sudhi here at Stanley Black & Decker, who is working very closely with Foghorn and Geminis also, and Tessa at Rockwell Automation. Rockwell is also investor in the Hive, and some of the very early interactions we had in creating Foghorn came through our conversations with their CTO, Sujit Chand. We've had a number of exits with these companies, and we are thinking a lot these days about the next set of companies that we are doing around remote and automated field services in the industrial context, around healthy buildings and healthy workspaces, around a new generation of MRP and supply chain, all related to the industrial segment. So if you are interested in joining any of these companies, we'd love to hear from you. And so if you're going to be tweeting today, please use the hashtag HiveData so that others can follow the conversation. So with that, I'd like to introduce Tessa Myers, the president of Rockwell Automation's North America, who will also moderate the conversation. Sudhi Bangalore, the global VP of Industry 4.0 at Stanley Black & Decker. And we have a special guest today, Elise Gauthier, who is the plant manager at Stanley Black & Decker, who will give us sort of in the plant perspective on this transformation that is going on. Tessa?
Great, and thanks so much for having us today. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Sudhi and Elise. And Rockwell Automation is happy to be a part and a supporter of the Hive. So thanks for having us join. So today we thought it would be a really great opportunity to give you a perspective on what's happening in manufacturing, and in particular trends that we've been experiencing and areas that we've been focused on to improve manufacturing that have been accelerated, and new things that we're learning and we're experiencing in the manufacturing sector. And also to talk about the partnership between Stanley Black & Decker and Rockwell Automation. So we'll talk a little bit about the partnership that we have as companies. We'll talk about what we're experiencing in manufacturing, and Elise will bring the real world perspective of a leader inside of a plant and what that's really like today. We'll talk a little bit about the capabilities that we think are necessary for manufacturing operations as we move forward. And then Sudhi and I will talk a little bit about the areas of focused work that we have together. So with that, and certainly, as Maddie said, please enter in your questions and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So Sudhi, maybe starting out, we could talk a little bit about the relationship that we have between Stanley Black & Decker and Rockwell. It was probably a little over a year ago that we started to work together to explore how combining the operational and technology from Rockwell and the domain expertise combined with your Industry 4.0 team and the operational expertise at Stanley Black & Decker could really accelerate digital manufacturing for Stanley Black & Decker and set a standard for the overall industry. And so we've been engaging on developing solutions and applications, and really with an intent to create flagship operations inside of Stanley Black & Decker that can be leveraged across your plant network, as well as really setting a standard for the industry. So anything you would add about the partnership and the work that we're doing together?
Absolutely. For everyone on the webinar, it's a pleasure and an honor to be talking about this really important topic, especially under this COVID umbrella, if you will. So it's very relevant, I think, in terms of some of the things we'll be talking to, and hopefully some of you might be able to leverage what we have learned over the last few months, and we would love to get other ideas. Hopefully, if you're in this space, both whether you're a technologist or if you're a peer of ours in manufacturing, we would love to also see if we can do some things better. So with that, Tessa, with regards to our partnership, I think it is unique in a couple of ways. One, it's not just about buying technology from a leader like Rockwell Automation. That obviously for some things it's a given, especially around automation. Rockwell is such a premier supplier of some of the best systems in the market, especially in North America. But I think the excitement comes on things that you're innovating, not only as Rockwell, but also some of our common other partners, such as Foghorn, for example, and so many other companies that we have at Stanley Black & Decker established as a partnership. So what makes this exciting for us is to engage on things that's already proven, and how do we innovate to deliver at speed, which is a really important piece of what we're trying to do as a program at Stanley Black & Decker. And the other thing is, for the ones that are not proven, how do we bring some different minds to bear on the problem and to actually test it out in real life, because that's really important in manufacturing. It's one thing that's critical is there's safety involved, and Elise will talk a little bit about safety and other aspects. So what makes manufacturing innovation unique is the fact that you got to test it in real life, and you have moving parts, you have old assets, and so on. So long-winded answer to your question, Tessa. I think it's not just about taking what you already have proven, how do we deploy it with speed and scale? And in addition, how do we engage on things to innovate that is not yet proven, and to do so in a very smart manner, considering that manufacturing is still a very clunky and not such a clean world as you would see in tech and business.
Yeah, I think those are the two salient points, is that how do we take things we can do today, scale them? How can we innovate together, which is kind of a new relationship? And then how do we build together an ecosystem
Right.
that complements our collective capabilities, because it does take an ecosystem to be able to get that done. So we want to talk about what we're experiencing in manufacturing, and what were either long-term trends that were accelerated, or what are things that we're experiencing today. And so Elise, I think you've got the practical experience of having led a plant through the last few months, and so maybe you start us out and talk about the things that are really impactful post-COVID in manufacturing that are here to stay. And then Sudhi, and then I'll talk about some things that are longer term macro trends.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tessa, and thank you, Sudhi. I think obviously, look, and you guys hinted at it well, right? Term and then the longer term impact of what the COVID umbrella will create for the manufacturing environment. I think first and foremost, and it's the obvious one, but talking about safety. So safety really transitioned for us overnight in the site from something that was very tangible on the plant floor, management systems that were in place to manage employee safety. That transitioned suddenly to a world where we were working to put processes in place to eliminate the presence or the risk of spread of COVID-19. And that included temperature screening procedures, enhanced social distancing measures through the sites, increased sanitation measures through the sites. And so from a tactical standpoint, those are obviously, driven by a high team of competent resources. We talked a little bit about, our typical utilization rates. I would say as a plant manager, I spend about 25% of my time pre-COVID on safety. And now in this post-COVID world that we're living in, it's really closer to about 50%. So half of the time that I am working, I am talking about safety in way, shape, or form. So that's really important to note, because I think it dovetails into what the obvious next step is, how do we utilize our time better when now we have this larger topic that has to be covered and demands our attention. And we talked about the digitization being really, really critical, because as leaders, we no longer have the luxury of spending time analyzing data to make decisions. We have to have that readily available for ourselves. So expediting those efforts to digitization is going to be really critical for our success over the next indefinite period of time.
Elise, you made a comment the other day that was, I thought, really an interesting insight, that safety has been a lot about the physical safety of employees inside of a plant. And now it's evolved to something more, which is safety and well-being, and wellness for employees, which I think is just a really, interesting concept of it's moved beyond the physical safety of your workers, and you have to consider, kind of overall wellness of the operations team.
Yeah, and that's a great note to make. I think we all talk about safety and well-being, and I think even pre-COVID, right, we talk about safety and well-being, and we always discuss how a happy employee outside of work is going to be more productive inside of work. But now you're right, this has transitioned into something that's more tangible for us, not only the employees' well-being, but we're focused on educating and providing supplies to our employees' family members as well, to ensure that they're kept safe, because we know if their household is, safe at home and they have the tools and the preventative measures that they need, we're going to ensure that that employee is even more safe when when they're not in our four walls. So that has changed significantly for us.
And in fact, if I can add on that note, one of the things we did in Stanley, Black & Decker, and Elise was obviously heavily involved in that. Not only are we, of course, supporting our employees in our operations with PPI, we're actually making them available for family members as well, because it's a natural extension of what Elise said. And I think it's the right thing to do. And I also think it's no longer, having worked with Elise quite actively, she's passionate about safety. And a lot of those safety aspects pre-COVID, while it can be profound in its impact if you have a bad safety incident, it was fairly, cut clear in terms of what safety means. But now I believe there's a whole emotional component that has been brought in, because there's so much anxiety about whether to come to work, and they may not want to come to work, and these are some of the things Elise talked about. So this just adds to the complexity and the amount of work people like Elise, who are leading our operations, have to face and manage. I think it's quite a daunting task.
Elise, you talked a little bit about the time that you're now dedicating to health and safety that you otherwise might spend on data, and so digitization of the plant floor information, I guess, is no longer a luxury. It's a necessity to have that visibility. But you have an interesting insight to how digital data connects with the safety of your workers too. And so, how you collect data and how you, transfer data in a plant, paper-based, doesn't necessarily make sense anymore.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So when we apply some of our same risk assessment tools with the new problem of COVID, simple things like data collection on paper is no longer a safe act that we consider. And so we're putting mitigation plans in place to try to alleviate the use of common sheets of paper or production reporting and things like that, this time 5 months ago, we were really taking, for granted that we were having this very simple act that really is no longer something that we want to encourage folks to do. So those new solutions, obviously we, have a bit of a headwind ahead of us to find a solution that's safe in the forefront for the employee, but we know that the answer to digitization is going to provide better efficiency in the longer term.
Mm-hmm. Sudhi, we've talked a little bit about supply chain resiliency and rebalancing and regionalization, localization, flexible manufacturing. Can you talk a little bit about what probably was a long-term, was a long-term trend and how that's been accelerated?
Yeah, so resiliency, there's obviously several facets to resiliency. And I think one of the critical ones of those on that list would be just transparency of our supply chain. And while that is, and then it became quite apparent how not transparent that whole supply chain was in the recent crisis we've seen over the last 2 months, especially people who've been manufacturing in China and that part of the world. So while in certain industries like pharma, medical devices, that transparency and visibility is much better. For some of the more industrial-like companies, it's much harder for us because a lot of our suppliers are not big, so they are smaller in size. They don't have access to technology. Again, things that are taken for granted in a business world are cutting-edge industries like pharma, as I said, because regulations dictate that you have that transparency. We don't have that in industrial. So our challenge is, while our supply chain within our own factories and ops might be digital to the extent that is fairly decent, our suppliers, we cannot say the same thing for our suppliers. So we're taking a new look at how we can assist our smaller suppliers with tech and strategy that becomes very important. The second piece of this is to really understand, to have a good feel of how you can move a second piece of resiliency is agility. And to define agility and to understand what you need to be able to model what if scenarios, because that's what happened. There's a lot of things you can anticipate and you can plan, but some that you can't. And for those scenarios that you can't think through, you need technology and modeling techniques that allow you to do that. So that has become really, really important. For example, if you have 3 different types of operations in a certain plant and you need to move 2 types of those operations into another plant, how easy it is and what's the cost to move. All of those things cannot be manually done with the size and scale that's needed in an event like what happened with COVID. So long story short, resiliency, at least some of the critical components are, how do you build transparency? Second, how do you model your capacity, model your cost structure? And so now when you do plan your what if scenarios, you're a little more confident in making some moves. Otherwise, you might risk losing capacity or also incur significant costs if you make some wrong moves. So those are some of the comments. And the third piece, of course, resiliency is making your process and manufacturing a lot more agile and flexible. And that's a bigger story. And we'll talk a little bit, Tessa, when we get into the topic of automation and robotics, et cetera. That's going to play a really important role in the third component.
So, are there any other trends that or things that are impacting manufacturing now that you think have been heightened in a post-COVID environment? We talked about agility and flexibility. We talked about the need for rethinking some processes and driving more digital. Is there anything else? Safety was a really big topic.
Yeah,
I would add on to the supply chain resiliency planning around more of a strategic view on that global regional diversification. And I think that was obvious with our most recent crisis, where we were having specific geographic locations that were seeing an impact more than others. And that problem followed us around the world, right? So as our suppliers were impacted, one supplier might have just come back up and we were working through problems with the supply chain with them, and then another supplier in another part of the world might have gone down. So improving our ability to diversify more proactively so we weren't, so reliant upon certain areas.
And I would add to that, one of the things that has become quite interesting is this concept of lean in manufacturing. Lean, obviously, one of the foundational aspects of lean is to eliminate waste of all kind, right? And so movement is a waste. How do you eliminate movement? So if you're especially involved in assembly of any kind, and our plants, some of them have a lot of assembly, and again, for those of you, we didn't talk about Stanley Black & Decker as a company. We're the largest tool maker in the world. And we also are quite significant in our solutions around fastening systems that goes into all kinds of automobiles, et cetera. So there's a lot of assembly involved. And lean means that you have to be really close to one another to assemble products so you eliminate movement. Well, now with social distancing, that whole concept has been appended. So how can you drive lean when you have to maintain social distancing? So there's a couple of things that we are evaluating in terms of how we can design systems and still be lean to the extent possible, and be safe and maintain the social distancing norms that have been established. Elise, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that was a really good summary, Sudhi.
Yeah, Sudhi, you and I have talked about before, in manufacturing, we've done such great work to lean out processes, and now we're really having to rethink them. And the implications of that are, like you said, you've got to rethink the processes and how you do them in a safe way. I think the economics on either digitization or automation applied to processes, the economics have changed because the way that we've performed those processes in a very lean approach the economics have changed quite a bit, right? And so the business case that you would have written 2 years ago around an investment in automation is going to be a much different business case than you are today, because the likelihood of how you have to change the process and the kind of improvement that you could make by applying automation and robotics is going to be different today
Totally.
than it would have been even 6 months ago.
That's true. And in fact, that's a great segue to the things we're doing at Stanley Black & Decker. As like most companies, we're taking a hard look in terms of how we can actually move parts of our supply chain that are more vulnerable, that's in the China and those regions, closer to where we make our products. This has been a strategy for Stanley Black & Decker well before COVID. For the last 3 years, we want to make where we sell, buy where we build. That has been a strategy, but now we have put a whole new emphasis on making that happen. And so, and I also talked to you about, talked about the fact that a lot of our suppliers are smaller. So there's a lot of technology we have to enable for these suppliers. So one of the things that's happening is, how do we make, for example, manufacturing in America more attractive compared to even Mexico? We do a lot of manufacturing in Mexico. So there's a lot of opportunity on one hand to rethink work and to rethink automation. And when I say rethink work, so the idea is, how can, for example, we have a major operations in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live, and we have 1 million square foot in our power tools facility. It's brand new. It's about a year or so. And so we're bringing a lot of capacity, and we have to be smart, to the point you were making, Tessa, about our business case. So, but now, given that we have this risk of our supply chain, that business case is becoming a lot more attractive. But then the question is, what about the people? We need people too. It's not just automating, which leads to a topic that I'm passionate about, is how do you now seek opportunities to find new career paths for people in manufacturing? Manufacturing has always, over the last decade or so, it's not been a sexy destination for young people, and we're trying to change that. And so, and now if you start automating everything, then we will lose that whole purpose of attracting young talent into manufacturing. So, long-winded way of saying is, it's not an easy situation. On one hand, you want to automate to take that risk and dependency of supply chain being so far away. On the other hand, you also want people in your factories. So the answer is, you have to really seek ways to find new career paths for people. And it needs to be exciting. It needs to be, for lack of a better word, sexy enough to attract the young crowd, the younger generation, into manufacturing. So I just wanted to add that dimension as well, both as a challenge and as an opportunity.
Yeah, I think education, training, and skills are if we pivot from the challenges that manufacturing is facing to what are the capabilities that we think we need in the future, training and education is one. Elise, you have an interesting take on how we train people in the future. Probably looks different, because we've historically trained with OJT, on the job training, with two people next to each other, one teaching the work to the other person. And so maybe some comments on that.
Yeah, obviously, kind of looking at that model in today's world, it's not something that's sustainable any longer, just given our needs for the social distancing requirements. We're right now kind of just pivoting to find a short-term solution to that gap, but we know that there are some tools out there that we're testing in today's world around essentially, non on the job training, where we're using videos and analytics, and you've got a point of view camera with an operator who's able to record their every move, and those are really the tools of the future that we are looking towards to be successful in the training realm. I think, like to Sudhi's point, it's such an incredible balance to look at, how do we move forward from a productivity standpoint while still maintaining, the workforce availability that we need to support the infrastructure we're building. I think finding the answer to that solution before we move forward down the path is really important, and having that strategy in place as we lay the groundwork for the next generation of manufacturing, specifically because we don't want to get all the way down the path and then have nobody who's available in terms of talent to support the system. So
we've been working on augmented reality and expert capture as a solution set, and I think this whole COVID has really kind of been an accelerant now. To be able to have leverage augmented reality, remote support capabilities, and expert training.
And on that note, Tessa, before I forget, you asked what's changed and what's surprising to me. One of the things that's surprising is there was a level of standoffishness, maybe not be the right word, but a level of skepticism from people on the factory floor about new technology. And that is naturally so. People like Elise, they have to run operations. It has to be safe. It has to be robust, etc. But now, my team helping us transform our factories with technology. We're finding such an openness to ideas that I've never seen in a lot. We're suddenly now realize that, my goodness, there's all kinds of things that we don't have answers to. Might as well go try some things. And again, 3 months back, that would not have been the answer that I would have gotten from some of our folks on the factory floor. And I've heard the same thing from my peers in other companies. There's a level of openness in manufacturing now, which is really, in my opinion, a very healthy sign.
Yeah, Sudhi, you mentioned earlier full supply chain visibility, and how extending beyond your four walls into your suppliers, so you can really get end-to-end supply chain visibility is gonna be a capability that you're going to need. Can you talk a little bit about simple data orchestration and analysis and visibility has got to be a capability, because to Elise's point, she doesn't have a lot of time to grab data and evaluate it. And so a lot of the work that we're doing together is really around, how do we simply, collect, analyze, and provide visibility to information that'll drive decisions. What kind of capabilities do you think that that you're implementing, and the things that you're going to need as capabilities in this post-COVID environment?
So if I talk about our suppliers in that profile of suppliers, not the typical large suppliers, but the tier 2 or 3 suppliers in terms of size and capability. To your point, one, they don't have a lot of tech, and we need to bring transparency to their 4 walls and what they're making, and how vulnerable some of those orders are for us into our supply chain. But also, as their level of capabilities in their factories is also not all that great in being able to read analytics and to interpret that and to translate that into action, Tessa. So one of the things that I see, especially for that tier of small to medium business, is a service-based approach where, yes, you put some technology in, but you provide insights that can be acted upon. So in other words, not just the dashboards, which is a good starting point, but then actually be able to provide action as a service, which is quite different than just insight as a service. But I think I just saw a press release from Rockwell saying that you'll be providing insights as a service. So I think it'll go a long way if you can keep those constraints in mind of the small to medium business. I think that'll be great, because not only will it help the supply chain transparency, but if you think about it, suddenly it unleashes a whole new level of productivity from all of these smaller suppliers. And this has been a segment that's been ignored because tech is too expensive. So these companies have a niche place and they do it really well. So I think there's a great opportunity for not just us talking about it, but a lot of the folks on this webinar today. If you're in tech, if you can focus on small to medium business, this is a sector that's been ignored. They've been on the fringes, playing with a few pilots here and there, but to provide, as I said, for example, to innovate, to say not just AI as a service, but action as a service. So you can actually act upon it and provide it in ways that they can really implement that in their factories would be a very neat way to look at an opportunity that is big.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Sudhi. We launched Factory Insights as a service with PTC and Microsoft, and it really was around lowering the barrier to and providing an ability to particularly for first use case, and then as you expand. So we're working on a number of things together, and so I think there's a lot of interest on what we're actually doing. And there's, I think, really 4 primary areas that our collaboration is trying to address some of the things that you're experiencing now, but really we've been working on it for quite some time. I would say some areas have changed in their level of priority for our collaboration because of the experience over the last few months. We've been focused on how do we collaborate on lean manufacturing and taking the Stanley production center, but being able to build a framework to almost institutionalize that, and through applications and technology, standardize that across your plants. We've been working on a connected factory initiative, which is really leveraging automation in new ways to construct and operate manufacturing lines and work cells, leveraging highly automated designs to really drive efficiency, support, as you look at localization of the manufacturing. And that's the one where I think that's moved to, very high on the list because of the experience over the last few months. We've been working on really the manufacturing execution system and deploying MES and software applications to drive process consistency and really build a baseline of information in the plants, and co-innovation around analytics and really around digital technologies that are applied end to end. And so maybe talk a little bit about, your perspective on those things that we're working on and, really the goals of the collaboration.
So you're right. One thing that bubbled to the very top was this whole localization, which is, I think, the top 4 trends that has evolved in the world, right? Not just in North America, but in the world, localization has become so prominent. So is your home experience and so on. So localization has a key tie into this whole supply chain moves, which is more risk oriented as well, right? So we're bringing a lot of capacity back, and I talked about Charlotte. And so the idea is, how can we make Charlotte as competitive as Mexico? And to do that, you need to drive automation, but not drive automation at a cost that is prohibitively expensive, and also does not allow for new career paths for our people. So that was important for us, but it was not at the very top. But now it's bubbled up to the very top. And so what's exciting is, I think in just a month and a half or so since we started this, we have Rockwell, Fanuc, and a company called Bright Machines, and that's a startup out of the Bay Area, I think. I'm not sure if they're from the Bay Area, but at any rate, so there's a slew of a slew of partners that have come together, and we made some incredible headway in just a month and a half. And we just had a review recently, and we are so pleased with it. We want to take that even further in terms of speed. And the idea is, and again, for everybody in this call, especially for folks with tech background, what we're thinking of is, if you can imagine coming up with a system, especially for industrial customers, again, not talking about medical devices, pharma, they're much ahead. So if you can think about creating a system that is affordable in the Western world, where we can actually create these small nodes of capability, operating capabilities, and make it affordable, then it's going to create an incredible impact with our agility and our ability to attract more growth in North America and beyond. And so Don Allen, who's our CFO, and I work for Don, had a great analogy. He was saying, actually, if we can do that, it'll be going from wearing concrete shoes today with our agility as that is a metaphor to have, wearing ASICs, if we were to get into that ideal state that I just described. So I think it's not just Stanley Black & Decker's story, it is an industrial story. So if we can make North America or the Western world as competitive, where we can build smaller, very special purposed operating units, I think that'll be incredibly powerful across the globe for localization and for local jobs and everything else that it stands for, better carbon footprint and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's what I think is exciting about the collaboration is it's technology partners and equipment machine builders that are working together to understand, how do we automate this effectively, cost effectively, and how do you kind of rethink processes to be able to do them in a way that there was a question that's slightly in the line of like, do we think lights out manufacturing is going to be the future? And I think it's a more like lights out work cells, right? Where you can fully automate a process or a work cell. That's really what you want to be looking at in terms of your manufacturing operation. Sudhi, I think you've got such a, our collaboration really around the information side, from MES to analytics. I think if you just talk a little bit about kind of the app concept and how we're building really an information infrastructure that you're going to be able to scale.
Right. So we have a couple of different types of apps, but I'll try to be as succinct as possible. So we have generic apps. To Elise's point, a common app in the industrial world that makes a lot of sense is paperless apps. How do we get rid of paper? Now it's become a liability. Having paper in a factory is a liability. It's a safety hazard. So that's, everybody is doing, has all kinds of paperless apps. We do too. So, and we also have, for example, a digital Gemba app, which is again a lean concept. So usually people would write on boards, etc., in terms of where we are in each one of the production steps. Now it's all digital. So that's generic types of apps. Then we have the second category of apps, what we call as performance/leak analyzer kind of apps. This is essentially looking at where the leaks are in manufacturing, which essentially means you're losing money, right? Or you can optimize your margins. And so that is very exciting. And the third thing which we are working together with, and in fact, Geminis, one of the companies that Ravi mentioned, could have a play in that, is now to actually hunt for leaks with all of our machines across the globe. We have thousands of machines across the globe, and we know that not all machines are performing at peak capacity and peak efficiency. So the idea is to use a combination of modeling and AI techniques is to really hunt for these inefficiencies in all of these assets, and then also using AI and others to remediate these assets in real time is going to unleash a whole new level of margin and therefore ability to transform our operations even faster and even better. I think this is a common problem across many industrial companies that have large, asset bases, that machining, molding, etc. That excites me the most, and we're working with Rockwell on that. We're working with smaller companies, and again, most of the things we're working on in SPD are themes that not only help the theme that I just talked about of going after assets that are not performing, is not only will it help us when we solve it, but it also helps the industry, right? And that is a big purpose statement for us at Stanley Black & Decker. It's for those who make the world, and in manufacturing, it's for those who make the world advance. So a lot of these apps are available for collaboration, and by design, as long as you're not competing, we would love to collaborate. We would love to help other companies engage on and build their own, use it in their own facilities. So that excites us a lot, Tessa, that last piece.
Sudhi and Elise, with the time that we have left, I've been monitoring the questions to see what we're addressing as we're just having the conversation, but there's a couple of here that I think people would love to have an answer to. Sudhi, Stanley Black & Decker has been bold in their vision, and my experience working with you has been that there's a vision, there's a clear value capture that we're pursuing together, and then there's been a boldness to act, and the speed at which I think you're operating is in some cases unique from what other industrial companies. So there's a question of like, why are companies getting stuck? I tried something, I piloted it, I haven't moved forward. But I think Stanley is unique because you are somewhat all in making a lot of progress in this space. So what do you think, from your perspective, is getting in the way of other companies, and what might they think about based on your experience at Stanley?
It's such a telling statement you made. I think the answer is the vision that Jim Lurie, our CEO, has set up along with Don Allen. It's bold to break the mold is one of our key statements, and that's what Jim talks about all the time, right? So you have to be bold and to make some decisions, and that's what we did with this whole program of Industry 4.0. We tried it in a few plants, and it worked enough. And then we also realized that we have to upend ourselves. We got to take some risks. So we stood up this very formal program that is now the team that you're talking to. That includes Elise in the factory floor, the plant champions to support Elise, and the core technology team that I drive. So yeah, that is a really important and key component. Is you got to take some bets. You can't be sitting at the edges and throwing out a few pilots. So anything and everything we can do to show that yes, there is tangible value besides the glitz of technology is so critical in the industrial world. So that I think it started with Jim making some bold moves in terms of digitizing not just our product design and the way we come out with products that matter. We've got great products, but it's also how we build it and how we serve those products with incredible customer service. So all those things are really important. And most important, how we upskill and reskill our people. We have to put the same level of passion around it, which it is for us.
Yeah, it's really not just, Industry 4.0 in manufacturing is an incredibly important part of the overall transformation strategy at Stanley Black & Decker, which is really a digital transformation, end to end in the corporation. Sudhi, I know you've done a lot of work around change management. Elise, you'll have some good insights here. A big part of changing processes and digitizing them and using automation and robotics at a greater level in a plant is the change management you have to do with the people who are now engaging with those new systems. And so change management's a big piece. I think you've done some really great work around how you're addressing that. And so maybe if you could talk a little bit about that change management element and things or people or resources or approaches you put in that you think is helping you.
Yeah. Well, I think Sudhi kind of touched on a little bit with kind of mentioning where he's, leading guidance has been is that we've got to be bold. We have to, as leaders, be able to influence with that same growth mindset. And we have to build trust with those employees that, these changes that are going to make us more competitive, and it's going to make everybody's life in our operational world more sustainable, because we're going to continue to have that competitive advantage being on the forefront of this technology. So that's how we lead with it culturally. And I think the other half of it is just from a technical standpoint. So, we talked about training a little bit. We talked about upskilling a little bit. It's really about understanding the resources that you have from a human capital standpoint and being able to manage the gaps and strategize to fill those gaps where needed. So you have a sufficient talent pool to work through those problems and those integrations that will come up. I think it's not without its challenges by any means. And I know Sudhi mentioned it with his prior discussion around people being open to new ideas and things like that. But, what we found is leading with that growth mindset is really the most critical piece.
And, Tessa, one last thing I want to add is you also have to have a passion and love for manufacturing. I do. And I'm sure Elise does. And she was mentioning yesterday that she started out in manufacturing. I mean, she started out in engineering, but she's been in manufacturing, right? Also her career. So, and Jim and a lot of us, we love and have a passion for manufacturing. So I think it's important if you have to, you have to, any country now, and it's Industry 4.0 is big, but to really make that successful, a lot of us have to appreciate manufacturing and what it does to economies, what it does to people. And that's a really critical component. And that passion has to be communicated to new generation in ways they can understand and change their parents' minds. Right now, it's not a sexy place in a lot of the older industrial type of manufacturing. So I want to add that piece.
I think manufacturing is a high-tech place to be. Sudhi, you've put some people in your team. I think one thing that's is valuable about the approach of Stanley Black & Decker, you have a centralized team who's working across business units and globally to drive solutions and standards and investments. And so I think that's helping you accelerate and kind of learn quick and then scale across the organization. You've done some things putting people that their focus is to enable adoption at plants. And so you've got people on your team they're kind of an enablement force that's working with plants.
Right. So the concept is to create care teams. In other words, it starts with caring for the person who's building the product all the way to the plant manager who is enabling the whole plant. So we have a concept of a care team, and typically the care team leader, the care director has a bunch of plant champions. And so even in Elise's plant, we have plant champions that actually enable the connection, if you will, from the factory floor to the technology team. That works really well. So as a technology team, we rely on plant champions and this care team to be the bridge, if you will, that brings that empathy and understanding and the sensitivities of a factory back into the tech team. This is something I learned in my past life, is you can't just deploy technology and walk away. You really have to care for the people to use it, apply it, and help them along with helping the business. Yeah. So that seems to be working pretty well.
That's great. So we're at time. This has flown by. Sudhi and Elise, any last thoughts?
Elise, I'll let you go first.
I think, we touched on it in our original discussion. I think the most critical takeaway from this post-COVID, pre-COVID, whatever you may be, I think that the key pillars of success in manufacturing and being successful in that VUCA environment are the same as they were 6 months ago. Not much has changed in how do we manage profitability and how do we manage operationally. So I think managing in that lean manufacturing world with a focus on continuous improvement, success will come.
And I would like to add this, I'm part of the World Economic Forum, focused on advanced manufacturing as one of the officers there. And this came up, and I want to steal somebody else's line and talk to the audience here in this call is, what would be amazing is how you can make manufacturing as agile as tech and, the tech world, where you can, it's a continuous cycle where you can test things and you evolve. So I would love for all of the folks who are tech and to take a new look at manufacturing and see how you can bring that agile mindset to manufacturing, because we're so behind in not every factory, of course, and not every operation, but in broad strokes, manufacturing hasn't changed much in 20-something years or 30-something years, right? So I would love for, hopefully this call, thanks to Ravi and the Hive team for setting that up. Maybe we can change a few tech mindsets and say, hey, this is an exciting place, some big things to win together, and not only to make some money, of course, and create exciting tech, but also I think this has taught us that manufacturing is important in this, in all parts of the world, including the US. So hopefully we'll convert a few minds today to take a closer look and bring that agile mindset and new ways of working.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks a lot for the opportunity to participate, Elise and Sudhi. Thanks so much for our great partnership. I think we're we're doing some very innovative things that are not only going to transform Stanley Black & Decker, but have value for the broader manufacturing industry. And so it's great to be on this journey to drive this innovation. And so Maddie, back to you.
What an amazing conversation, and really kind of great insights from you, Tessa, Sudhi, Elise. In fact, the number of questions that have come, we'll need 2 more sessions to answer them. So perhaps we should think about maybe one other session covering kind of some aspects of manufacturing and digital transformation. I want to thank you all, and especially also thank the audience for really making this an amazing event.
I would like to second that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you all so much. This recording is going to be available on our YouTube channel, which is dropped in the chat, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks again to our amazing speakers. This was such a great event, and we look forward to seeing you guys again. Thanks. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.